thank all of the Vaishnavas gathered here today to commemorate a special occasion, which is the departure of three distinguished previous acharyas of the Brahma Madhva Gauriya Sampradaya. To celebrate the departure of such esteemed Vaishnavas, we will sing and reflect on the song by Thakur Mahashai, Narottam Thakur Mahashai. It's on your screen, you can see that. And we will try to reflect on the activities of these departed Vaishnavas in pursuance of this song. Je Anilo Premadhana Karuna Prachur Je Anilo Premadhana Karuna Prachur Heno Prabhu Kotha Gela Acharya Thakur Heno Prabhu Kotha Gela Acharya Thakur Kaha moro Sharup Rupo Kaha Sanatan Kaha mor Sharup Rupo Kaha Sanatan Kaha Dasha Raghunatha Patito Pavon Kaha Dasha Raghunatha Patito Pavon Bashane Kutibo Mata Anale Poshibo Bashane Kutibo Mata Anale Poshibo Gauranger Gunero Nidhi Kotha Gele Pabo Gauranger Gunero Nidhi Kotha Gele Pabo Sheshav Sangiro Sange Je Koilo Bilar Sheshav Sangiro Sange Koilo Bilar She Sango na Paya Kande Narottamo dar She Sango na Paya Kande Narottamo dar Thank you. He who brought the treasure of divine love and who was filled with compassion and mercy where has such a personality as Advaita Acharya gone? Where are my Swarup Damodar and Rupa Goswami? Where is Sanatan? Where is Raghunath Das, the savior of the fallen? Where are my Raghunath Bhatta and Gopal Bhatta? And where is Krishnadas Kaviraj? Where did Lord Gauranga, the great dancer, suddenly go? I will smash my head against the rock and enter into fire. Where will I find Lord Gauranga, the reservoir of all wonderful qualities? Being unable to obtain the association of Lord Gauranga, accompanied by all of these devotees, in whose association he performed his pastimes, Narottam Das simply weeps. In the Bhagavad Gita, Sri Krishna tells Arjuna that those who have offered their hearts to him, mat chitta, and their life breath, mat gatah prana, engage in one activity. They are constantly enlightening one another. Bodhayante parasparaha. How do they do that? By constantly engaging in conversation. Kathayante mam nityam. And by doing so, they become tushyanti, they become delighted, and they ramanticha, they become fully satisfied. And this is the hallmark of Vaishnava association. When we look at the traditions of meditation around the world, we would notice some will say just sit straight, neck straight, spine erect, chant Om, focus on the tip of your nose, bring your concentration to the middle of the eyebrows, and so on and so forth. But the process of Bhakti Yoga is so sublime that one simply needs to engage in conversation, and that becomes meditation. And these conversations, these exchanges of love, making music, kirtan together, sharing prasad is vilash, means delighting in the company. And Narottam Das Thakur asks, where did all these people who delighted in each other's company suddenly go? And this vilapa, initially it starts as bilash. Bilash means loving exchanges, and then when Vaishnavas depart, it becomes vilap, which means regret and sorrow. But the process of Sri Krishna consciousness is so sublime that even when there is the departure of Vaishnavas, which is a cause of great sorrow, it is still a celebration. There is nothing in this path which is not a celebration. And so today we celebrate the departure of three glorious Vaishnavas, Rashikananda Thakur, Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj, and Srila Tamal Krishna Goswami. And I'll glorify them one by one. In the Bhagavad Gita, we also hear Jada jada hi dharmasya glanir bhavati bharata buddhanam adharmasya tadatmanam srijamiham. So Krishna says, I manifest myself whenever and wherever there is a decline of dharma. And Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur points out, and Srila Prabhupada writes the same thing in his Bhagavad Gita as it is, that do not think avatars appear only in India. Avatars appear around the planet and in cultures. To the extent there is dharma, these avatars appear to maintain that dharma. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur further says that to the extent there is the presence of a pure devotee, according to the capacity of the people, pure devotion also manifests after dharma. This is in his Vidvat Bhanjan Tika, and Srila Prabhupada summarizes that in his Bhagavad Gita as it is. So Sri Krishna and his dear associates keep appearing time and again because things in this world decline. And it is said that after Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu left, the enthusiasm of kirtan went down. For a period of time, there was no kirtan. And in Bengal, Birabhadra Prabhu really kind of expanded the Sankirtan movement a second time. And in the generation of Narottam Thakur, Shyamananda Prabhu, Srinivas Acharya, this kirtan again took off. There was a second wave. And Srila Rupa Goswami explains that this is Bhakti Rasa Amrita Sindhu. Sindhu means ocean. And if there is an ocean, there are waves. And in this way, in the ocean of devotion, there are waves of Sankirtan, except during Mahaprabhu's time, there was a tsunami. Nobody could escape. And Shyamananda Prabhu had many disciples, and in the Bhakti Ratnakar, 15th Taranga, it is mentioned that Rashikananda Prabhu was one of them. He was constantly enthusiastic about going everywhere and spreading the glories of Sri Chaitanya Nitai. But, as I mentioned, in every generation, things happen that causes dharma to decline. And after Mahaprabhu's departure, as dharma began to decline, his followers took up the responsibility of upholding dharma, and Rashikananda Thakur was one of them, spreading the Sankirtan movement beyond the imagination of what people thought was capable. And such personalities have to take many, many risks to be able to do what they do. And we hear in Bhakti Ratnakar that one time a mad elephant was set on Rashika Murari Thakur, and he tamed it. And this particularly is very significant because our Shastras say that any feeling of animosity towards other Vaishnavas, holding grudges when we are corrected, is the mad elephant disease. It is Vaishnava Aparad. And as the creeper of bhakti grows, there are weeds that come around, according to Kaviraj Goswami, that we need to pluck out. But even after we grow a huge, beautiful garden, nurturing every plant with the water and sunlight of Shravanam, Kirtanam, and beautiful flowers begin to manifest, if there is the elephant of Vaishnava Parad, then all those days and years of penance will disappear in 5 minutes. Right? This is the nature of the mad elephant disease on the path of bhakti. And Rashikananda Thakur proved. Thank you for the reminder. Rashikananda Thakur was someone who had so much strength that he could not only tame the mad elephant in real life, but he saved so many others from this mad elephant disease simply by giving them the ecstasy of chanting the holy names Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. In a few generations' time, if we kind of look at the history of India, you would notice that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came at a time when there were at least 3 warring kingdoms in North India. In Delhi, you had the Delhi Sultanate. This was before the Mughal period. The Mughal period started about 1530s. So in 1480s, we had the Delhi Sultanate. In Bengal, you had the Shahi dynasty, and we hear about Nawab Hussain Shah as the emperor of the Gauda region. And further south, we have the Gajapati kingdom, and Maharaj Prataparudra was the king of that kingdom. And the relation between these three were not always very cordial. And so if we look at the song, Je Anilo Premadhana Koruna Prachur Heno Prabhu Kotha Gela Acharya Thakur Kaha Moro Swarop Rupa Kaha Sanatan Kaha Das Raghunath Patito Pavon. You would notice that these people who became the 6 Goswamis came from different areas, and some were from further south. And this was a time in India when caste was such a strong determining force that people who were born in Brahmana families and would interdine with non-Brahmanas would lose their caste and be cast out. They would become outcasts. However, if you look at it, Rup Sanatan Goswamis, who were in the service of the Hussain Shahi government, became Vaishnavas. They were Bhatta. Bhatta means Brahmana. They became Vaishnavas, and it was in that time mind-blowing to see that 2 Muslims have such wonderful cordial relations with 2 Brahmins and a Kayastha and a Vaidya, right? Such intermixing was never heard of. And Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu made it possible. And such feelings of goodwill, such beautiful community, where will I get that today? Is the Vilapa of Narottam Das Thakur. Where have they gone? What happened? Right? And this song also tells us not to take the association of Vaishnavas for granted. So, by the story of Rashikananda Thakur, I wanted to share a realization on the mad elephant disease. With the life of Jagannath Das Babaji, I want to share a small realization on why we should not take Vaishnav association for granted. And with this, I'll get into some discussion on His Holiness Tamal Krishna Goswami Maharaj. Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj is known as Vaishnava Sarvabhauma. Sarvabhauma, Sarva means everything, and Bhumi means earth. Sarvabhauma means universal. So sometimes within the Vaishnav communities, there are differences. But there are Vaishnavas who rise above such differences and guide the path for everybody else based on common principles and higher principles. And in 19th century Navadvip, Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj was such a personality. I had the good fortune, by the grace of Tamal Krishna Maharaj, to serve the estates of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and going through all of the letters of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, his personal journals, and serving his deities, spending time with his family, has opened up such windows into the spiritual world that I can't even begin to describe. It came to my attention, and if you have been to Mayapur, you will notice this, that Bhaktivinoda Thakur had 2 places on the other side of the Jalangi river. Right? One is his Bhajan Kutir, and then the other is his residence. In his Bhajan Kutir, you would notice that it's a 2-story house, which is quite large, and then a little further apart in front of the door, you have the kutir of Gaurkishore Das Babaji. And looking deeply into the history of it, I realized that Bhaktivinoda Thakur had several residences. He was traveling around a lot, and he had different groups of Vaishnavas live in different places. And Gaurkishore Das Babaji Maharaj was not only a Bhajananandi Paramhansha, but he was also a kind of a property keeper at Swarupganj. So he had his own kutir and he was guarding that place. And he used to love to come and hear Bhagavat Katha from Bhaktivinoda Thakur. And one of the letters I noticed was a little money order Bhaktivinoda Thakur would send to Gaurkishore Das Babaji Maharaj every month for his maintenance. And it is expected that Vaishnavas, when they enter their final retirement phase, they take Babaji initiation, at least that was the norm back then, and they renounce home. But Bhaktivinoda Thakur did something very amazing. He went to Gaurkishore Das Babaji Maharaj and he said that I have saved the kaupin, the undergarment of Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj. He is such a great Vaishnava. Now it is my request that you give me Babaji initiation by giving me the mantras and giving me the dress of a Babaji. And so Gaurkishore Das Babaji Maharaj very kindly offered Jagannath Das Babaji's kaupin Bahirbash to Bhaktivinoda Thakur and gave him Babaji initiation. But one interesting thing happened, which is Babajis, after getting initiation, they leave home. Bhaktivinoda Thakur, after taking Babaji initiations, went back home. Why? Because there were so many Babajis who were taking up the dress because there was some social leverage. They could make money, they could get free real estate, their meals were covered, and so they would take this up as a profession because they had some security in retirement. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur pointed out that this is not proper. It is better to stay at home as a Babaji with one's family and children and engage constantly in the chanting of the holy names than to artificially renounce and leave. And my connection with Jagannath Das Babaji, or our connection, is with Srila Prabhupada and Bhaktivinoda Thakur. He is such an exalted Vaishnava that I don't even feel qualified to stand in front of him. Right? Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj also had no attraction towards the glitter and glamour of this world. And one time, one disciple, Bihari Das, was carrying him in a basket, and as he was going, Bihari Das was not very well dressed, and Babaji Maharaj was also an Akinchan Vaishnava. He didn't live in luxury. So this rich man saw that, such a poor Babaji, let me give some money. And Babaji Maharaj was on his way to do a program at someone's place. And midway, Babaji Maharaj said, actually turn around. I want to give this person his money back. Why? Because he did not give this to serve, he just gave it out of pity. Right? So he should get his money back. So he was very particular about these kind of things. And when Bhaktivinoda Thakur began preaching in Bengal, he started opening centers. There were many Namahattas, but in Midnapur, where the preaching really flourished, the house of the local zamindar was turned into a library and a temple that exists to this day. And Gaurkishore Das, Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj was brought there, and Bhaktivinoda Thakur writes in his letter to his son, Lalit Prasad Thakur, that Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj was in ecstasy, dancing, whenever he saw new preaching opportunities open up. And my realization in this regard is, Srila Jiva Goswami established the Vishwa Vaishnava Raj Sabha, and he writes that in his Sarva Sammadini, to protect the properties that were created by his predecessors on the instructions of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. and ensure that each of these facilities are constantly used in Krishna's service. When the Mughal government passed and the British government came, all those old deeds were basically useless. And the legal documents with Jiva Goswami's signature are still there in the museum of Radha Govindaji in Jaipur. So if somebody is a researcher, they can go and look it up, the Farmans. And so when those documents kind of lapsed, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur took the principle of Jiva Goswami and re-registered the Vishwa Vaishnava Raj Sabha. And Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj came to inaugurate it. And my realization is that Srila Prabhupada says that if he has any credit, he did not change anything. Right? And so the International Society for Krishna Consciousness is an English translation of the term Vishwa Vaishnava Raj Sabha. Everything that all our previous acharyas have given us is right there. Vishwa is international, Sabha is society. It's a Raj Sabha, means a royal society, but there is also a slesha, a pun, which is very common element of Bengali and Sanskrit poetry. So Vaishnav Raj, Raj can go with Vishwa Vaishnav Raj Sabha. Raj Sabha means Royal Assembly, or it can be read as Vishwa Vaishnav Raj Sabha. Vaishnav Raj means Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So it's an international society for Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Krishna Chaitanya, Krishna consciousness. So the International Society for Krishna Consciousness is a translation of Vishwa Vaishnava Raj Sabha that Bhaktivinoda Thakur registered, that the Goswamis registered, and Srila Prabhupada continued in the exact same mood, and this is why we have the mercy of the entire parampara flowing within this movement. I finally want to speak a few words about Srila Tamal Krishna Goswami. I got in touch with him in 1998 when some of his disciples went and told him about me and he wanted me to write to him. And our relationship became sweeter and more intense. And if anybody knew him personally, you would know that he was sometimes a very, very difficult person. And it is my greatest fortune that he was difficult with me. Not just difficult, very difficult with me. On 14th March 2002, I was serving him, and I was planning to come back to Calcutta with him in his car. That's how the arrangement was for the last year or so before that. He came and stayed in my place in July 2001 and gave me initiation. And so August, September, October, November, December, January, so about 8 months later, he was in Sridham, Mayapur. And on the last day, when we were planning, packing up, he told me, Krishna Abhishek, go to Kolkata, see me there. And I was not very happy because, we used to speak in the car. I wanted to be physically close to him as much as possible. And then the road back from Mayapur to Calcutta, especially the road from Swarupganj to the Krishnanagar railway station, was a dangerous road. You had robbers, kind of stopping these three-wheeler auto carts and basically leaving you naked on the road to figure it out. And so I didn't want to go, but he insisted that I go. And then next morning at about 5:18 a.m., I received a phone call from one of my godbrothers, Nityananda Ramprabhu, saying that Srila Gurudev has passed on. And I didn't believe him. I said, you must be joking. So I called his room up, and Sridhar Maharaj, who is now passed on also, picked the phone and confirmed the news. And I found out, in bits and pieces that there was an accident and the driver hadn't slept a couple of nights as he was ferrying devotees back and forth from Mayapur, and he fell asleep on the wheel, and Tamal Krishna Maharaj was late for his flight and they were speeding, and at Shantipur he couldn't see and hit a tree and the mishap happened. On a very personal level, I was planning to sit adjacent to him because that's how he always drove. And the lady who was sitting there that morning passed away. Her name was Vrindavaneshwari Dasi. She was the wife of Kalasambara Prabhu from Australia. And, it just occurred to me that I would have been there. Tamal Krishna Maharaj literally gave me, by accident or by design, a second life. And then at that exactly 20 years till date today, this incident happened. Then the purport of that song, Je Anilo Premadhana Karuna Prachur Heno Prabhu Kotha Kela Acharya Thakur, became real for me. Because I had just surrendered my life and I asked him, what should I do? And I was about to join the Merchant Navy, and he said, stop that and come back and do Vaishnava academics. And help me, because I am finishing my PhD and I am trying to come to Bengal. And his dream, which I didn't understand at that point, was that the real glory of Mayapur will be broadcast around the world if we can establish this as a center of higher education. This was the vision of Bhaktivinoda Thakur. The Navadvip Shantipur area was the Oxford and Cambridge of India, Asia, back in the day, during Mahaprabhu's lifetime. Advaita Acharya was a great professor. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was a professor of grammar and logic. The Navya Nyaya, the neologic school of thought, came from Navadvip. And even today, there are doctorate students doing their research on this Navya Nyaya school at great universities like Harvard and University of Chicago. It was such a place of academic brilliance. And the dream of Tamal Krishna Maharaj was to re-establish this. Why? Because Srila Prabhupada asked him to do it. And he realized that if we hire professionals from the outside, they will either take over everything and compromise Siddhanta, or the devotees will kick them out because they will not like them. And therefore he insisted that Vaishnavas actually go to universities, get academic credentials, and come back and help establish a Gaudiya Vaishnava spiritual university in the Dham. That was his dream. That was the last thing he did. And it was somehow my very good fortune that, he called me and I didn't have a clue about what he was talking about. And when he stayed in my house, my father met him, and my parents are not devotees. And so my father challenged him, said, you are an escapist. And nobody challenges Tamal Krishna Maharaj. It's a bad idea. It's a very, very bad idea. A few hours before that, he personally stood at the door of my bathroom and had made me re-clean his bathroom because there were some little red spots here and there. And he was calling his friends and telling them, here is my new disciple, Krishna Abhishek. He doesn't know how to host a guest, and I am having to supervise the bathroom cleaning. And he kept smashing me, like, I don't know why he was doing that. And, there were devotees outside in the living room doing kirtan, waiting for him to come and give a class. And after receiving so much from him, I thought, I had enough, no more. let me just sit quietly, peacefully in a room. I have heard enough Harikatha, right? And I was just sitting in my room alone, and somebody came knocking. Krishna Abhishek, Gurudev is calling. Okay, tell him I'll come in a few minutes. And I was just trying to drag my minutes, I just didn't want to face him. Krishna Abhishek, Gurudev is calling. I finally went. Everybody was dressed up in nice dhoti kurta, tilak. I was, in my t-shirt and PepsiCo pants because I was cleaning the bathroom, right? And in one way, he exposed me in front of the whole world. And then I realized he was actually speaking about me to the public. And he was saying nice things. I said, what's going on? I didn't understand. 8 months later in Mayapur, same thing. About 5 days, 7 days before he passed away, 2 days before Shivaratri, he asked me, Krishna Abhishek, do you think there are mangoes? And I wasn't even thinking. I said, yes, Gurudev, I'll look. It didn't occur to me that you can't get mangoes in March in India. So I went around the Mayapur campus looking for mangoes, and then I realized that you can't have mangoes. I was like, oh no. And I went back and said, no, Gurudev, we don't have mangoes. And he said, you cannot give your Guru false promises. I was like, uh-oh. I didn't expect it to snowball like this. So I went around Navadvip. Anything, mango seed, anything mango, just give me whatever is related to mango, just give it to me. And the best I got was this drink called Electrol, like a little, that balances your potassium sodium levels, with mango flavor. So that clearly wasn't good enough. And he says, you cannot give your Guru false promises. And he did not say it so nicely. I said, I didn't know what to do. I was so embarrassed. I just packed my bags, took a bus, just went to Calcutta. And on the road, I was thinking, this is so embarrassing, so embarrassing. I said, why did I even open my mouth? And it occurred to me that my grandfather had once told me that in this market called New Market in Calcutta, everything is available, including tiger's milk. You want to drink tiger's milk, go to New Market. That's the saying in Calcutta. So I said, if you can get tiger milk, maybe you can get mangoes too, who knows? So I instead of going home, I went to New Market. And I says, are there fruit vendors here? Went to a fruit vendor and I asked, do you have mangoes? He said, no, it's out of season. He says, is there mangoes anywhere on planet Earth you can get for me? And he said, yes, in the Mediterranean they have mangoes. We can import it. I says, please get it. He says, I need it in 2 days. Right? And Shivaratri was coming up. I need it in 2 days. And he said, in those days, in 2002, he said, it's 900 rupees a kilo. I didn't have that money. I was a poor student. And so I borrowed money from my mother. I went to New Market, got 2 kilos of mangoes, and took the bus back to Mayapur. I stayed in Calcutta 2 days till the mangoes arrived by FedEx. Okay? I went back to Mayapur. He was going out for his GBC meeting. I placed the mangoes at his feet and I offered him my obeisances. And he just took the boxes and he was so happy. And he said, take 1 box and give it to Radha Madhava. And, give it to Jananivas Prabhu. So I just took 1 box and gave it to Jananivas Prabhu, and the other one he relished. He was a little late for the GBC meeting that day. He was relishing mangoes. And in this way, he just kept pushing me, and what initially felt like harassment is the deepest treasure of my spiritual life today. One night, as he was going to bed at my place, I offered him my respects and said, Srila Gurudev, I'm so sorry that I try to serve you, but I'm not competent and I keep making mistakes and, I'm not up to it. Please forgive me. I think I should just stay at a distance. And he stopped me and said, that don't think I like doing this. I don't like chastising. But I'm doing this because if you learn how to serve me perfectly, one day you will be able to serve Radha Krishna perfectly. And in this lifetime, I'm your spiritual master and you're my disciple. So it is my job to correct you. And that's my only motive. So when I heard that, any misgiving that I had in my heart just simply disappeared. I said, all right, bring some more. I like the sauce now. And in this way, he guided me for a short period of time till he passed on. And before leaving, he told me to sincerely pursue the path of becoming a scholar studying Gaudiya Vaishnavism, so that one day we are able to establish Srila Prabhupada and Bhaktivinoda Thakur's dream. Of course, when he said this, I did not take it very seriously. Only after he passed away, it occurred to me that this is serious business. I'm not here for a joyride. And interestingly enough, I was in a very small no man's land college in Calcutta, Bidhanagar College, second batch of students. Nobody knew about that college. But because he had said, I applied to Oxford University, and somehow, against every odd, I got through. And when I went there, Shonak Rishi Prabhu, who was the director of the Oxford Center for Hindu Studies, gave me a giant hug, welcoming me there, and said, Tamal told me about you. And this was 3 years after he had passed. So it again occurred to me that even when the spiritual master is not physically there, somewhere he is orchestrating things, and we are in good hands. And this is the process of Krishna consciousness. And this is what Narottam Das Thakur kind of presents when he says, Je Anilo Premadhana, this wealth of love that we have, and Karuna Prachur, this infinite amount of grace and kindness. Heno Prabhu kotha gela Acharya Thakur. Acharya, my teacher, professor, Thakur, my Lord, where are you? Kaha moro Sharup Roop, Kaha Sanatan, Kaha Dasha Raghunath, Potito Pavon. And when you realize that Vaishnava association is so rare, and you had it and you lost it, then you realize Pashane Kutibo Matha, Onole Poshibo, Gorangero Gunero Nidhi Kotha Gele Pabo. Eshabo Songiro Sange Je Koilo Bilash. Every story I mentioned today is a bilash, is a particular incident that happened that enhances our love for Sri Guru and Sri Krishna. She Sango na paya kade Narottama Das. Right? And we follow in the footsteps of Srila Narottam Das Thakur in remembering our previous acharyas. In fact, we will be successful on the path of Krishna Bhakti, I think, if we learn how to live with our previous acharyas. Right? So that was my third point. The first point is about not committing Vaishnava offenses, and when I say that, I'm preaching to myself. The second point is the rarity of Vaishnava association, and the third is graceful flow, and this is the process of Krishna Bhakti. I thank you very much. I'm very, very grateful once again for welcoming me and having me a part of the Gainesville Alachua Vaishnava community. I hear this is the largest community of Vaishnavas in North America, and for me that means this is like the spiritual world. And if there is any way I can serve any of you, I would be very delighted and grateful to do so. We have about 5 minutes, so we can have one or two questions. Yes, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, thank you for coming, and again, welcome. Thanks for the nice presentation. Earlier you mentioned that relationship between Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur and Gaura Krishnadas Babaji. disciple of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur,
Yes.
but he turned back and gave Babaji initiation to Bhaktivinoda Thakur.
Hmm.
So, can you explain a little bit of that relationship? Like it's kind of switched around. In one sense, he became the guru of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur.
It's transcendental. Yes, they were very close to each other. Like Rupa Goswami, Sanatana Goswami. Sometimes Sanatana Goswami glorifies Rupa Goswami. Sometimes Rupa Goswami glorifies Sanatana Goswami. One is a senior brother, but he takes a junior role. One is a junior brother, sometimes takes a senior role. And similarly, Gaurkishore Das Babaji, and there were a few other great sadhus in the area, was serving Bhaktivinoda Thakur. He used to hear from Bhaktivinoda Thakur, but he also gave the Babaji initiation on behalf of Jagannath Das Babaji Mahasaya. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur was taking inspiration from Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj, others too, but Jagannath Das Babaji Mahasaya mainly. And after Jagannath Das Babaji had left, Bhaktivinoda Thakur had saved his clothes. And so when his time came, he approached Gaurkishore Das Babaji Maharaj and said, "You give it to me on behalf of Jagannath Das Babaji," because Bhaktivinoda Thakur was not a Babaji. Gaurkishore Das Babaji Maharaj was a Babaji. Just as a sannyasi can give sannyas initiation to another person, even if they are senior by age or by the years they have spent in Krishna consciousness, particularly if the other person's spiritual master has already departed. In that sense, Gaurkishore Das Babaji Maharaj gave the Kopin Bohirbash to Bhaktivinoda Thakur because Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj had already departed.
So that wasn't something that was pre-planned before the passing of Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj?
That I haven't read their mind, I don't know. But, I think that Vaishnavas, engaged with one another in that way, and Bhaktivinoda Thakur was also very humble. So he showed by his personal example that it is better to become a servant of the servant. Thank you. Was I able to answer your question? We have 1 minute to go, so if there is any last question, otherwise I thank you very much once again, and I'm very grateful to all the listeners online and in person. We are going through troubled times. There's a Russian-Ukraine war going on. The pandemic has not yet ended. The world is in a very distressful condition, and the day can be saved only if we all carry forward the mantle of our previous acharyas, and in whatever small capacity we can, serve the mission of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, which is Jive Daya Krishna Nam, right? Mercy, grace, compassion towards living entities, and chanting of the holy names. That in essence is the life and soul of the three acharyas that we discussed today. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram.